Hello again, book lovers. The Neanderthals Rediscovered, How Modern Science is Rewriting Their Story by Dimitra Papagianni and Michael A. Morse. What do we know about the Neanderthals? Well, I didn't know very much and I wanted to know more, so I bought a couple of books and this is the first one. If you want a summary, you'll find it on page 178. It reads like this. Descended from Homo heidelbergensis, they became expert hunters. They developed Levallois stone tools, survived in harsh climates by developing clothing and fire, buried their dead, cared for the sick, exploited a range of food resources, including from the sea. They used red ochre, possibly for symbolic purposes. They had language, and they expanded their homeland to the Near East, Central Asia, Siberia, and survived in harsh northern latitudes. Well, that paragraph is more than I knew before I started reading this book, so any advance would be an advance. There are a couple of intellectual stumbling blocks to my reading about these Neanderthals. Firstly, I wasn't sure if I'd enjoy it. Archaeology, paleontology, it's all digging through dust, and there might not be a lot there to comment on. And the second thing is getting my head round the scale of time. I'm very keen on Mesopotamian history, which I kind of see as the beginning of history. It's when writing began. And already you're talking about 3000, 4000 BC. So from there we're going back, before recorded history. Let's go to the end of the last ice age, 10,000 BC. Well, the Neanderthals weren't around then. They'd already died out, so we're going to have to go back a bit further. The last Neanderthals that we know about were from about 20,000 years ago, and they were holed up in Gibraltar. Oh, while we're on place names, I should say, a lot of discoveries were made in a place in Norfolk called Happisburgh. Well, you might read it like that, Happisburgh. I happen to have been there, and I happen to know it's called Haysborough, which is never mentioned, so if you do read this book, you can silently pronounce it correctly in your head. Happy coincidence of place names is that the Neanderthals get their name from the Neander Valley, and Neander was a Greekifying of the German name Neumann, which means new man. That's nice, isn't it? Of course, they weren't men, as in humans, but they are part of our family tree. Well, if this is all new to you, it was new to me as well, and I should say this book did a good job in explaining it, and has a lot of nice little what-ifs embedded into it, because this is the jigsaw puzzle with no pieces, or very few, and we have to imagine what the rest of the picture looked like. Did Neanderthals, for example, as there seems to be some evidence for, shack up with 2 females to 1 male? That's never seen in the exhibitions, is it? And there are a couple of myths that I'll look at right at the end. In amongst the texts we get some explanatory boxes which are pretty useful about skull shapes, about red ochre, about volcanic activity, and we get the story of the, as far as we know, migrations of the different species of humanoids, let's call them. So we have a sort of story that takes place over well over 100,000 years, reads rather like a novel as the various tribes go into various areas of the earth. And we don't kind of realise now we're the only Homo species left. In those times there would have been different types of human-like species wandering around. It would almost be a Tolkien-esque landscape of different clans and species. Did they ever meet each other? Well, there would have been large periods when they didn't, because the population density was so small. But it's now thought that interbreeding did take place. In fact, we're pretty sure we've all got some Neanderthal genetic makeup in us. In the way of internet algorithms and their mind-reading facilities, while I was reading the book, I got news of a 300,000-year-old skull which has just been found in Greece, which is neither human nor Neanderthal. Another chapter of the story might be about to be written. Now, having mentioned Gibraltar earlier, I should say that it's not mentioned in the texts, but it's referred to as a small British protectorate near the south tip of Spain. I'm assuming this is a kind of a joke, but the authors do seem a little bit reluctant to say certain things. In one analysis of an analysis, we read Houghton relied unduly on the concept of race. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. Is it that we've advanced our concepts of race? Do we deny the concepts of race? Would that lead to us denying the concept of species? We seem to be quite confident in saying that the Denisovans weren't the Heidelbergenses, etc. When do we have to stop making these divisions, I suppose, is my question. Race is such a hot topic these days that a lot of people are beginning to question its usefulness as a concept. I invite those people to my charity racial awareness basketball match in which the Inuit will play the Maasai. One way around the idea, of course, is to talk about populations. I've seen a lot of historians and sociologists talk about populations. Kind of gets around it because there never was a 100% ethnically pure tribe, ever, I would suggest. But even when you use the word population to describe the mass of people that live in a territory, it does throw up some complications. For example, how would you deal with Malaysia as a population, in inverted commas, if around a quarter of the population is ethnic Chinese? It depends what you're looking for, I suppose. The idea of race comes up again when cannibalism is discussed, and one of the ethnographers is accused of getting it wrong, quotes, possibly from a well-meaning anti-racism, close quote. Why? Because he didn't want to attribute cannibalism to Homo sapiens. Trinkhaus, the chap in question, described cannibalism as that dreadful bestial practice. Therefore, you could separate modern humans from older humans by imagining that we never did that sort of thing. The authors wisely comment that this could be seen as, quote, a mirror of our prejudices. But then, not naming Gibraltar and tiptoeing around the idea of race might also be seen as prejudices. I'm nitpicking here, of course. The book is a very good read, I should say, and certainly taught me pretty much everything I know about Neanderthals. I've got another book to read which goes into more detail about the culture, so I'll be looking forward to that. That was written in 2020. This book was written only a few years earlier, but the rate of discoveries and advances in this field is quite staggering. So I've got a taste for it. I'm looking forward to learning a bit more. Here's a couple of things I grabbed from this book, because at the end they have a nice little run-through of Neanderthals in popular culture. Well, our image, of course, is that Neanderthal would be a stooping, monkey-like creature because a skeleton was wrongly put together. This is the famous old man skeleton, as it's known, who was, by the way, 30 when he died. So probably didn't stoop. They were very strong. We can recreate their facial features. They were predominantly right-handed, like us, and most animals that are handed. And we get a lot of our information from carbon dating, which also has a nice explanatory box to tell us how that works. Now, this only has a 40,000 year limit, which I didn't know, so anything prior to 40,000 BC, say, would be more and more dependent on guesswork, although there is a technique called ultrafiltration, which apparently can give us more details. And two works of art are mentioned. One is The Clan of the Cave Bear, which I've neither read nor seen the film of, and the other one was Quest for Fire, which I did have a look at and enjoyed thoroughly. Yes, you can quibble about timeline inconsistencies. Very unlikely that in the space of a couple of months a tribe would have discovered a sense of humour, face-to-face sex, and how to make fire. But that doesn't matter. It's a rollicking adventure. I really enjoyed it, and I don't think it fell into too many of the traps. I could even invent, if you'd like, a reasonable timeline for how things in the films could have happened, given such small population density at the time. But anyway, that's all in my head. The critiques, which is mentioned on page 182 of the book, which did surface in the film, can be put in the form of a question. Why do cavemen and Neanderthals always seem so antisocial when eating or having sex? Well, that's a good question. Anyway, fascinating stuff. It's opened up another avenue of interest for me. It's not boring at all. And it was interesting at the end to see where the stooped posture myth had come from. It was a chap called Boole, by the way, who didn't realise that the skeleton was arthritic. And the ideas of the cave bear seems to be completely imaginary. The idea that Neanderthals used lots and lots of flowers for their burial rites has no or very, very, very little evidence. Flowers don't last that long. And as the authors noted, is a theory that coincidentally emerged during flower power. Could that be us casting our shadow back onto history again? And finally, music. Did they have music? Well, music began, I imagine, with the human voice accompanied by percussion, but we found a bone flute from tens of thousands of years ago. The only thing is, we don't really know if it's a flute. But there you go, the idea of the flute-playing, happy hippie Neanderthals dancing around their sacrificial pyre is probably rubbish, but they did so many other things. And this book, I would say, is an excellent introduction to the Neanderthals and the study thereof.